Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for a discussion about life insurance in 2021 and beyond. I'm Sarah Parker, Senior Director and Insurance Market Lead at the Financial Health Network, and I'm excited for the discussion we have planned today and the panelists who are joining us. So here's our agenda for our 45 minutes together, and let's dive right in. We're hosting this webinar now because September is Life Insurance Awareness Month. And this past year has seen remarkable increased interest in life insurance among consumers. I was just reading some of the latest research from LIMRA that in the first 6 months of 2021, the total number of life policies sold increased by 8% compared with prior years. And this is the highest policy sales growth recorded since 1983. Similarly, total US life insurance premiums increased 21% in the second quarter of this year, and that's the largest increase since 1987. So we are really seeing a once in a generation change in consumer demand and interest in life insurance. And yet we also still know that there is a protection gap that the industry needs to address. And we need to get creative about ways to meet consumers' insurance needs. So these are the topics that we want to unpack today with our speakers who have direct industry experience to draw from. So to start us off, I'd like to hand it over to Andrea Hager, Senior Vice President at Franklin Madison, and the sponsor of today's webinar to provide some additional context for today's discussion. Andrea?
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you everyone for joining, and also to our partners who are participating here with us today. We have quite a stellar lineup of panelists. I'm Andrea Hager, Senior Vice President at Franklin Madison, and we are a key distributor of insurance in the financial institution marketplace. And as Sarah mentioned, it has been an unprecedented couple of years here as we look at insurance and how it's really come to the forefront of consumers' minds with everything that's been happening. So in early 2021, Franklin Madison, we decided we would charter a consumer survey to really dig into some of their thinking on life insurance in particular, and also life insurance and how they think about that in conjunction with their financial institution. And so just to share a few key insights, which we're going to dive into here a little bit deeper today, we learned, as Sarah kind of shared, market share for life insurance overall is good compared to other insurance products. But it's not great. You know, we're still sitting at 60% of consumers have the product that are eligible for it, but we have opportunity there, not only in the other 40%, but making sure we're getting the right amount of coverage in the hands of the consumers. And with the change in the environment, consumers across the board, right, not just insurance, they want simple and convenient. But in particular with insurance, they want advice that came out very clearly from a source they trust. So not just advice from their parents, they want advice from a source they trust. And so we really dug into that. Consumers trust financial institutions. So why are we not seeing a higher purchase rate in the financial institution marketplace? And overwhelmingly, the reason here was just a lack of awareness. Time and time again in the comments and the feedback, it was stated they did not know their financial institution offered life insurance. So I think we have a tremendous opportunity there, as Sarah referenced. And last, as we think about the generations and who is buying life insurance, Gen Z and millennials, both segments, were most interested in purchasing life insurance in the next 18 months. So those two generations have an eminent need that they're thinking through in their financial wellness and overall picture. And so as we think about those segments, also highly targeted by the financial institutions, there's a great opportunity for us to think about how we bring the life insurance message forward. I do want to cite, we did this research in conjunction with payments.com. So thank you for their support. And Sarah, I'll turn it back to you to go ahead and get us started.
Great, thank you, Andrea. Yeah, I know we'll get a chance to further unpack some of your research findings in our discussion. So to jump into these topics, here are our speakers for today, and I'd like to ask our other three speakers to come on camera. And then I'll ask each of you to briefly introduce yourself, your company, and what you focus on in your work. So there you all are. And let's start with Liza.
Thank you, Sarah. Hey, everyone. I'm Liza Amaro, and I serve as the Director of Digital and Acquisition Marketing at McGriff. We're an insurance brokerage firm that's a wholly owned subsidiary of Truist Financial. And in my role, I manage our direct-to-consumer insurance marketing program, which offers supplemental insurance products and services to our Truist Bank clients.
Great, thanks. Ed, let's go next to you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm Edward Bronnenberg. I'm the Senior Vice President for Randolph Brooks Federal Credit Union. We're a $13 billion organization, and in my role, I oversee what we call our for-profit subsidiaries. We have 7 CUSOs, or wholly owned subsidiaries, for the credit union, and I oversee those activities for all of our operations. 2 of those are specific to investments or life insurance, and so we have a lot of experience in that arena.
Great, thanks. And Elizabeth?
Yes, thanks, Sarah. I'm Elizabeth Johnson with Securian Financial. I'm a Director of Client and Partner Relationships in our Affinity Solutions market. Securian is a financial services company that has been around for over 140 years. We're a Fortune 500 company and have almost $1.3 trillion of life insurance in force, with more than 21 million customers across North America. Within Securian, and in my role, I work with our affinity partners, including financial institutions and distributors, to offer products such as life insurance, accident, kind of living benefit products, sickness and involuntary unemployment products that can bring protection to both the insured as well as the financial institution. Thank you. Happy to be here today.
Great. Thanks. Well, thanks to all 4 of you for being here. And let's jump right in. So let's start with COVID. That's how all conversations these days start. But as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the stats are really astounding. There's just been a huge increase in interest in life insurance and purchase of life insurance. And you just have to assume it's because of the pandemic and people really feeling like they need to protect themselves and their loved ones. And so I would just love to hear from each of you about what changes and impacts have you seen in your own business among your own customers, both direct to consumer, but also with your corporate clients, in terms of how the pandemic has changed people's perceptions, needs, and ultimately the actions they're taking when it comes to protecting themselves, specifically with life insurance. So maybe we'll just start in the same order and start with Liza.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. At Truist, we're definitely seeing an increase in insurance sales in 2020 and to date this year, more so than prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's because we're seeing customers think about and ponder and treat risk differently in light of the pandemic today. They're contemplating, they're enrolling in coverages like supplemental life insurance or living benefits that Elizabeth mentioned, like hospital indemnity insurance or disability unemployment insurance, things that many of our clients weren't even considering prior to the pandemic, things that weren't even on their radar. They didn't think they had a need for these types of things. So they're asking questions, they're asking for education, and like I said, our sales are definitely up. So it's telling us that this time we're living in is really resonating with our clients and awakening them to the need for coverage for these types of risks.
Ed, do you want to jump in next from the credit union perspective?
Yes, I think just to echo a little bit about what Liza was speaking to, just in our product offering, we've seen a significant increase in inquiries in regards to protection, whether that's life insurance or health, but both. The COVID has definitely sparked that concern within the consumer. And typically, I think we see that in the life insurance arena, right? I mean, it's events like this that tend to spark that. We saw it 9/11. We see it in some other activities as well. And so those types of things, give us a 2-3 year ramp up on opportunities for life insurance. And so from an institution standpoint, we've seen a lot more inquiries. We've definitely seen that transform into sales for us. But the other thing with COVID, and we've seen this trend even on the financial institution side, is they want the electronic deliveries, but to Andrea's point, they still want to speak to somebody and they want advice. So I'm sure we'll talk about this as we get into that. looking at providing those opportunities through different channels. But we've definitely seen an increase in the last 18 months from our perspective.
Yeah, and we'll definitely come back to that question of digitization, but also still the human touch. Well, Elizabeth, let's go to you next.
Sure. From the insurance company perspective, as you can imagine, we've seen a significant impact of the pandemic, both in an increase across the industry in life insurance claims and payout, deaths related to COVID, as many of us can relate to, as well as unfortunately a death or an increase in deaths across the country of what we think of as COVID correlation. So people delaying going to the doctor, delaying going to treatment, so maybe not catching something quite as soon as possible. So across the board, the industry has seen a significant increase in benefit activity, life insurance, involuntary unemployment insurance. 2020 was one of our highest years for that, with the layoffs and the shutdowns that we saw in Q2 of that year, Q2 and Q3. That said, from the insurance company's perspective, this is also where we matter most and where we come through to be there for policyholders and their families and when they need us. And to echo what Liza and Ed had said, and I think we'll hear a really common theme today, that the peer-to-peer impact of seeing our families and communities and coworkers go through the pandemic, whether it's challenges with jobs, hospitalization, or ultimately even loss of life, that really resonates with customers. And we see that coming full circle in the increase in activity. And on the positive side, we've also seen a change in the way that life insurance is brought to customers. So pre-pandemic, we had an initiative underway at Securian to move from a predominantly paper-based and kind of face-to-face labs, et cetera, underwriting process to a contact-free underwriting. And we were fortunate that the work was already underway. We were able to accelerate it in 2020 and bring it to the market so that the majority of our customers, depending on the market, have the opportunity to fully apply and enroll for their life insurance with through a contact-free process. We're using, new data sources and other things available to the market and to the insurers or insurance companies to avoid customers having to have go to the doctor for a medical exam, or even have somebody come to their house and have labs drawn, something that was probably not fathomable for many people in 2020. So while it's a challenging time that has brought us here, I think it is really just the beginning of another transformation in how life insurance is delivered to customers going forward.
Yeah, great. And then Andrea, did you have any last thoughts on just the overall changes we're seeing in the industry?
Well, I'd say same to everything they all said, and just add that in addition to an increase in consumer purchase of the product, we saw our current customers kept the product at a higher rate than we had seen in prior years. So maintaining their current policy and continuing to make those premium payments, we saw a slight increase there, which continues to show the value of those solutions.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot of customer behavior related to this beyond just purchasing a policy. There's purchasing a policy, there's purchasing additional coverage if you already had a policy, it's keeping your policy current. These are all points in time where people can drop from coverage. And it's interesting that in all of those areas, you have seen consistency and more kind of commitment to the product.
Yeah, it is surprising, especially when you think about some consumers were struggling financially during the pandemic period. So to see retention of policy increase was surprising.
Yeah. So let's build off of what Elizabeth was sharing in terms of, everything in the pandemic had to shift to a virtual or digital setting. And insurance was not an exception. If anything, it really, I think, had pushed the industry to move faster towards digitization, which is great, or speed up things that were already planned, kind of like the example you gave, Elizabeth. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, how that's played out, and how has the insurance industry kind of been able to make that shift? How have your companies made that shift? What does that look like, from underwriting to claims payout to just the sales process in general. Elizabeth, you mentioned some of the things around claims payment, underwriting. Did you want to add anything else to that?
No, I would, I would just say, I think you hit it, that whether it's the immediate customer need from the pandemic, or in a little bit, we'll talk about innovation that goes on within the industry, that this is really all of a time that we're seeing it come together. And while it is a challenging time, it's an exciting time and transformational time. And we know that financial institutions play a really important role with their customers and their members, and not just from an insurance perspective, but the overall financial management, savings planning, retirement planning, whatever it might be. And so this is a really exciting time for it to come together. And we continue to, I think, predict and see it will evolve, but always be a multiple touch point process. I don't think we're going to see the pendulum swing one way or 100% always online. We continue to see the role of person-to-person consultation, even over the phone, what that might be important in the process, either on the sales end or in working with beneficiaries and insureds to manage their policy, and how they work through the claims, the claims process, and ensure that they are receiving the benefits that they're eligible for.
Great. Ed, how about from your perspective? You talked about the digital touch, but also how you've seen the need for still the human touch as well. What does that look like from your perspective?
So we've seen similar activity. We were fortunate in the beginning, or actually probably about 18 months prior to COVID, to partner with Franklin Madison and their Ethos partnership in that product. So there was a lot of already activity occurring on our side, where members were able to come in and try to begin the initial process and actually go through the underwriting process online. That was a big piece for us because, growing up in this industry, spending 27 years in there, you give a, tentative quote to the client then goes back and waits 3 weeks, 4 weeks for contact and doctor records and those types of things. And it was more of a stressful environment for them. And it later on became very difficult because we got very accustomed to an Amazon environment, right? Everything was ordered, it was delivered to me within the next day or two, and I knew exactly where I was going. And with life insurance, I still had to wait a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever. So that opportunity in that shift was already there for us. But COVID, I think, like you said, really pushed the envelope in regards to delivery channels. Some of these things were being planned by us or by other institutions to say, hey, this is our 5-year goal. Well, our 5-year goal became a 3-month goal real quick when COVID hit. And so it's amazing how quickly IT partners can move when they absolutely have to in a forced environment. So it was definitely a drastic shift, but we've seen a lot of activity in that regard from a member being able to go on and do that. Now, I will say that we used to use the older channels on our financial institution standpoint, and even from our investment management team. But most of our investment advisors now are using this product, a fully underwritten product that we use through Franklin Madison, up to $1 million, where they can get in a quote within probably 10, 15 minutes, and it's a firm quote. And then they can underwrite it or bind it right there. So it was an easier transition for our advisors because a lot of their activity went from face-to-face to virtual. So it was something they could do, and they could actually walk the member through that process as well if they needed to, and satisfy that protection need in a financial plan without having to go through a long process of waiting or asking the member to be inconvenienced with any kind of face-to-face activity, including, somebody in a white lab coat showing up at their door during that time frame. So it has worked well for us. We've seen an uptick in activity, and it's become a pretty significant tool that even our advisors are using.
Yeah, interesting. And just to clarify, you mentioned the partner Ethos. That's an online life insurance provider who does this automatic underwriting, all online. And
Yes.
it's interesting that in the old version, where it took kind of 6 to 8 weeks to finish the process, I mean, the challenge there, not even to mention that it's somewhat intrusive and all of that, is people just dropped out of that process. Interest waned, they forgot, it got busy, and then just that was it. But when you have people's attention and you can provide them with what they are looking for, in a matter of minutes. Let's not equate an Amazon order to life insurance. They're different, right? What I just bought on Amazon 15 minutes ago for my daughter is different than a life insurance policy, but still, there is something to be said about really responding to a need responsibly, but quickly. So let's shift a little bit to the people's perceptions, or rather misperceptions, of life insurance. This is Life Insurance Awareness Month, and we know that there is a protection gap, as Andrea mentioned earlier. What are you seeing as the main misperceptions among your customers? And this can be pre-COVID, post. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the misconceptions were there even pre-pandemic. Liza, can you speak to what you've observed from the perspective of Truist Bank and more broadly about what some of those misperceptions may be?
Sure, happy to. One thing we're seeing at Truist among our customers is the need for us to focus on educating, particularly the younger generations. I'd say those under the age of 40, about the importance of life insurance, how it helps you prepare for the unexpected and potentially those catastrophic type events. We know that the older generations, they've typically relied heavily on insurance for protection against catastrophic types of losses, and definitely life insurance protection as well. But today, the younger generations, the millennials, the Gen Zs, they often feel that when they're buying insurance, they're paying for something they think they're never going to use, or something like life insurance is not something that can benefit them in the here and now. So the responsibility lies with financial institutions and insurers both to educate these customers and turn around those misperceptions. In fact, at Truist, we've established a dedicated business unit that focuses on this customer segment, those under the age of 40, with a concerted effort to educate them on financial protection, with the ultimate goal of deepening those customer relationships and introducing them to products and services like life insurance and supplemental health insurance that can help them keep their finances and their standard of living intact if they're ever faced with that type of loss, an unexpected health event, or another type of catastrophe. And Andrea, I know at Franklin Madison, y'all have a ton of research and insights that you have on those generation gaps as well.
We do. Thanks, Liza. And I would just echo, we in the research heard some of the exact same things you're saying here around misperceptions. So in particular in Gen Z, it was interesting because we asked them, when you go to learn about life insurance, where do you go? And you're probably not surprised to hear that they said Google. So their first trusted source was Google. And that's, a lot of us have gotten into that routine a little bit. And so if you go to Google and you search life insurance, it just immediately becomes overwhelming. So I'd encourage all of you to go do that. There's so many providers, so many messages out there. And so what they said was they next went to their parents. So I kind of joked about that in the beginning, but they went to family members next. And so I think that, that third trusted source is the financial institution. And so how do we bring that to the forefront of these individuals' minds? And so they talked a little bit in their feedback about more information in the social media channels from their financial institution about life insurance, not only to drive awareness, but also education of those pieces. And overwhelmingly, we heard the misperception that life insurance is way too expensive. I can't afford it. And so I think we have to really drill into that component and help them understand what the cost is for their policy.
Yeah, our research showed the same, just overestimation of what the cost would be for certain policies. So let's talk about that idea of kind of the role of a customer's primary financial institution in their search for insurance products. What would your advice be to financial institutions that really want to integrate insurance into its offering? It may not be kind of their bread and butter as a retail bank or credit union, but they know it's a need among their customers and one that they want to provide as that trusted source of information. Ed, can you kind of speak to some of the successes and challenges that you have had as a credit union that is offering insurance to your members?
Absolutely. I think the level of participation that you're going to get from your membership, I think, is also based on the level of opportunity you're able to provide from a financial institution. Some financial institutions are fortunate to be in a position where they have programs such as an investment program and advisors that can speak directly to that, and some don't. And for those that don't, I think it's important to know that you need to find the right partner to be able to give you that electronic delivery, but not just the delivery of, oh, we have life insurance, right? I think Andrea's point and even Liz's point was, you need to have a partner that has a campaign that's not really built around the advertisement of it as much as it is about the awareness and then the education. Because when you look at that relationship from a financial institution standpoint, it's one of the stickiest relationships that a consumer is going to have. On a credit union side, and speaking to that, it's extremely sticky. And there's a lot of trust there in most cases. I mean, those overall member quality ratings are pretty high from that standpoint. So it goes back to that point, though, that Andrea made in the beginning. I think it was point 3 on her slide, which said they don't even realize that the institution is offering it, right? If one, the advertisement's going to be there, and you need to be able to be in front of those members, because it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. If I need life insurance, the last place that I'm probably going to go look for it is the last place that I heard from it. Excuse me. The first place I'm going to look for is the last place that I heard from it. Who gave me the last advertisement? Let me start there, right? What's the biggest name that I saw? So you have to stay in front of them, and that's part of that advertising piece, but it's that education process that you go through as well. So even being able to offer very short webinars, maybe pre-recorded webinar activity that they're going to be able to go in online, they're going to be able to find that fairly quickly within your online tools, then that's going to create the awareness and the opportunity to touch them, especially for those that don't have advisors or maybe investment programs. For those that do, then it's really going to drive down to the advertisement and some tools that you're going to be able to have. I mean, we have so much more member segmentation now that we can actually drill down and say, you know what, I need to get to the Gen Z, I need to get to that Gen Y. They're thinking about it in the next 18 months. So instead of running an expensive campaign to 1 million members, let me find out the 125 that are in that category, and let's market to those 125 and really specifically spend the next 18 months getting that material out to them. I think those are the things that you have to really be focused on if you're going to build the program.
Yeah. And Liza and Elizabeth, both of your companies are leveraging financial institutions as a channel for insurance distribution. So what do you have to add from your perspective of really how to leverage that channel for kind of customer success?
Sure, I'll jump in here, Sarah. Thank you. And Ed, education, because we see that over and over and over. So many of our clients at Truist still aren't aware that their financial institution offers insurance. So that's something that we continue to hone each and every day. But something that we particularly focus on at Truist with the integration of insurance is, how is this going to affect the client experience? There's so many competing factors when you're introducing any new product and service to the FI environment, and insurance is no exception. But particularly at Truist, it's of utmost importance how anything is going to affect the overall client experience. How is this insurance offering going to add value to the client? Are we providing the client with access to insurance products and services that they may not otherwise have access to? Are we educating them about insurance in the right way? Are we partnering with providers and with carriers who can interact with our clients in a way that meets or exceeds the Truist standards for the client experience? So from the bank's perspective, the Truist Bank's perspective, the impact to the overall client experience is something that's top of mind when we're introducing any new insurance product or service to our client base.
Great. Yeah, Elizabeth, do you have something to add?
I think, yeah, just to expand on what others have said, life insurance is not an impulse buy for most people. It's not Amazon's fantastic for impulse buys. But life insurance and other financial protection products, other insurance products are, provide such an important protection to members and customers, but it is a process. And to reiterate what Ed and Liza have just said. It's 7 times 7 ways times 7 different channels. And the message may be the same to the Gen Z as it is to the boomer generation, but the channel may be different. And so really, from a financial institution's perspective, giving your members and customers, putting information in front of them in a way that's understandable and makes it real to them. In studies that we've done, we often hear a barrier is not just an awareness, but then it's understanding, and that there can be a fear behind it. And in a 2020 study that we did on some of our credit union customers, we found, surprisingly or maybe not surprisingly, that while the different generations have very different levels of using insurance for financial protection or catastrophic protection, as others have said, they share some really strong commonalities about wanting to protect themselves and their families, both from a short-term and a long-term perspective. So that need and that desire is there, but as part of human behavior, it's the fear of not knowing how to ask about it can sometimes be a barrier in and of itself. So the more the financial institution can do to work with its distribution partners, its carrier partners to develop content, use demographic information, as Ed said, those 125 people that really are in the moment now may be more impactful to both, the financial institution and those people than touching the million. So I think that peer-to-peer and giving information and sharing it in a relatable content. We have to take our own insurance jargon out of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to take some questions from the audience. We're getting some good questions here. If anyone has additional questions, please just put it in the chat function. But we got a good question just around, we're talking about the role that financial institutions can play as a trusted source for clients when they make a big purchase like life insurance. But sometimes communities don't actually trust their banking institutions. There is cases where you have mistrust, and we all know that net promoter scores for banks aren't traditionally very high. So I'd love to hear maybe from you, Ed, as you're kind of working directly with members and you're trying to build the trust that your credit union has with members, how you can build that trust. And then Andrea, any insights you have as you kind of broker the relationship between financial institutions and insurance providers to make that match? Anything around how to build trust for maybe customers who may not see their financial institution as a trusted source?
I think it goes back to kind of what we all three talked about here for just a few minutes is the education. You have to really focus on the education first. If you can provide clear, concise, and transparent education to them to help them understand that product, because I know Liz brought up that part of that is just even the understanding or the willingness to ask the questions to help them better understand how, what is my premium going to, what is my actual cost of insurance, those types of things. They don't understand how to ask that, or they're afraid to ask that. So if we can provide the education that provides the transparency for that, then afterward the opportunities will come, because they're going to go to where they feel like they receive the most trusted information and the most educated information that help them in that process. Then they'll turn around and that's who they're going to use. So from our perspective, it's really providing, even in our advertisement, it's not just an advertisement piece, there's education in each of those pieces that goes out to those clients / members. So that is our, from our focus, that's the key thing, is providing the transparent education to them and then seeing the results come from that.
Andrea?
Yeah. And Ed, I think that's interesting that you went there. We have quite a bit of interaction with consumers as we're working on some of the marketing we send out for life insurance on behalf of the banks and credit unions. One of the things we always see that is so interesting to me is if we send something via direct mail, the consumer tendency is extremely high to then go to the bank or credit union website, read about the products. In life insurance, they even like to go in and get their own quote. And so do a little bit of their own research themselves. And then they either come back and enroll or purchase through the direct mail channel, or they purchase through digital. But a lot of times they will pick up the phone then and call the financial institution And so we were talking a little bit as a team about just how critical that integration is for financial institutions between their marketing, their education, and then their online and offline experiences. And so I think that's the way you ultimately build trust, is by having trusted and transparent information in multiple sources for the consumers. And that's where we've seen the most success with partners, is those who do a good job.
Mhm. We got a question that is related to that, which is that, and it kind of speaks to what you're saying, Andrew, that there's this, we often say at Financial Health Network, there's the tech and the touch. You need the tech so that people can do things online when they want to, but you also need the touch. If people want to talk to a person, that needs to be available as well. And especially for a large purchase like life insurance, that's really important. But there's a question around, educating members is important, but what are some of the tools that you've seen or you've used to educate the frontline team members who are the ones answering the basic questions or walking people through the need for life insurance? If you are going to have that human touch, then that person on the other side of the phone really needs to know how to engage and answer questions related to something like life insurance. Does anyone want to speak to that question?
I can start and then maybe turn it over to Ed or Liza from the financial institution perspective, but I think it's a really great point to bring up. And it goes back to that trust full circle, that the financial institution is sharing information, whether it's mail, online, et cetera, that their member or customer has received information about something. And it's so important to build that trust that when the member or customer reaches out to their financial institution, that they're able to talk to somebody who at least is aware and kind of supporting of the whole program. It may not be, the walking into the bank, and which some of us still like to do, and seeing the teller face to face. The teller may not be the one expected to be the life insurance advisor, but they're, how the financial institution can make training and just that even information availability or product availability open, accessible to its employees, I think helps. We've seen help when we get questions, how much that can help build the trust from the customer's perspective, that they're able to at least get affirmation of, oh yes, here's what it is, and let me direct you to our customer service area, the agents, who it might be within that financial institution.
Mm-hmm. And Liza, maybe you can touch on that, but I also want to throw in another question that we've got, which is interesting, which is around, and Andrea mentioned this at the beginning, if you've seen any changes in retention with newer generations. What have you seen to help improve retention? Is it digital engagement? Is it, even maybe after benefits payouts, just how the retention process looks so that people stay engaged, retain their policies, and what some of that looks like. So maybe you can address either or both of those topics of retention, but also really how you train kind of the frontline workers to be the best advocates for your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say education is also key with our frontline workers as well. Can never have enough education. And it's important that even if, like Elizabeth said, you have a client walk into the branch and ask their teller or their banker, hey, I got this offer in the mail, or hey, I heard y'all offer life insurance. They may not be able to speak to that product directly, but know where to refer them to get that information. So it gets back to your insurance group having that open communication, that open dialogue with that frontline leadership and the leadership training and development area. But as for the retention piece, Truist has done a lot in the past couple of years to diversify our marketing channels. Previously, we were really marketing insurance from the direct-to-consumer standpoint anyway, which is what the area that I'm responsible for, through direct mail only. And that's not always what resonates with, especially the younger generation. So in order to reach those younger generations, to educate them, to connect with them, we have to go to where they are, where they're spending time, how they're responding to communications, which is, of course, in the digital channels. So exploring email, exploring online and mobile banking messaging, exploring social media marketing and messaging with how to connect with those customers where they're spending time. And we have seen increased retention rates as well through COVID. As I was mentioning earlier, how our sales have increased with the awareness of our customers seeing the need for life insurance, for hospital indemnity, for the disability and unemployment protection. Those who already had those coverages in place prior to COVID are keeping the coverages, which we were anticipating it might be the opposite since unemployment rates were increasing through the pandemic. Maybe some would allow their coverages to lapse, but we really haven't seen that, which has been amazing and really reinforces that the more we spend educating our customers and reaching them about how to protect their overall financial picture and mitigate those risks, the coverages are staying in force.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We only have a few minutes left, so I want to get to one more audience question, and maybe Andrea, I'll direct this at you, which is, we're talking a lot about the protection gap, and obviously a lot of times the protection gap exists among low and moderate income individuals. And so I'm interested what your experience has been, what your thoughts are on how we can bring more low and moderate income individuals into the life insurance industry. And we kind of had a whole series of questions on InsurTech innovation that we didn't even get to because we had some great questions. So I think that's a piece of it, but I'm also interested in other thoughts you have on how we can really bring the most financially vulnerable into a place where they can also have some protection.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I know many financial institutions are very focused in helping elevate the financial wellness of all of their consumers, which has been a great trend, I think, in the industry over the past 2 to 3 years here. We believe in targeted marketing, as we were talking about, and really getting to those individuals who we think are most likely to purchase. But we also think it's really important that there's at least a couple times per year where the financial institution is taking the opportunity to message about products and services, especially more affordable options to the entire consumer base, or as many as possible. So whether that's through email or direct mail or social channels, there's many options to do that. But I think it's important to have that balance of targeted marketing, but also a couple times a year, at least, it's important to get out to the broader consumer base with education and messaging, and really the affordable insurance products.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I would just expand just at the very end on to add on to what you said, Andrea, that it's really, it's a variety of products. None of these products are one size fits all, whether it's hospital indemnification and how much somebody, needs or wants, or life insurance or accidents or whatever it may be. So knowing that the channels are so critical, but also the flexibility in products. And there's some great products out there that can provide important protection to the more of the LMI base at potentially a reduced level, and that as their insurance needs grow and change, the products can grow and change with them also.
Great. Thanks for that. So we're already at time, but in closing, I think the one takeaway I'd like to leave everyone with is this theme that we've had throughout this discussion of really thinking about how we can get life insurance into the hands of the people who need it and to help close the protection gap. And if you think of insurance as not only a protection plan, but also as providing peace of mind, I can really think of no better offering to give to people right now as we're still in the midst of a very stressful pandemic than peace of mind. So as an industry working together with banks, credit unions, insurance carriers, brokers, I hope this conversation has really motivated all of us to double down on our efforts to make sure people have that peace of mind. So thank you to our 4 speakers for your time and insights today. Thank you to Franklin Madison for sponsoring today's discussion. And thanks to everyone who joined us. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sure. Thank you.